The moving truck had barely pulled away when Tom began to feel at home in Oakwood Heights. The small community of townhouses nestled between tall oak trees looked perfect in the late summer sunshine. As a 32-year-old software engineer who'd spent the last 5 years in a cramped downtown apartment, the extra space and quiet neighborhood felt like heaven. Finally, Tom whispered to himself as he parked his Tesla Model Y in his assigned spot on that first evening. The sleek blue electric car stood out among the other vehicles, mostly sensible sedans and SUVs. He'd bought it 3 months ago after getting the promotion that brought him to this new city. Every time he looked at it, he couldn't help but smile. It represented everything he'd worked so hard for. The first few days passed in a blur of unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, and figuring out which light switch controlled what. Tom's townhouse was on the end of a row of 6 identical units, with a small patch of grass out front and a tiny patio in the back. Not huge, but still 3 times bigger than his old place, and the community had a shared pool and tennis courts that made up for the modest private space. By the end of his first week, Tom had met a handful of neighbors. There was old Mr. Reynolds, next door, who offered to lend him gardening tools, even though Tom barely had enough plants to justify owning a watering can. The young couple across the way, the Patels, had invited him over for dinner. Even the teenage boy who walked dogs for extra cash had stopped to chat when Tom was bringing in groceries. Everyone seemed nice, but they all had the same strange reaction whenever Tom mentioned joining the community's social media group or attending the next HOA meeting. "Just keep your head down," Mr. Reynolds had advised cryptically, lowering his voice despite them being alone in Tom's kitchen. "The less she notices you, the better." "She?" Tom had asked. Mr. Reynolds had just shaken his head. "You'll find out soon enough." It was exactly 3 weeks after moving in when she finally appeared. Tom had just returned from a grocery run, arms loaded with paper bags. The afternoon sun beat down as he struggled to keep a carton of eggs from sliding out of the top bag. That's when he noticed someone standing near his parking spot. She was a short woman, probably in her late 50s, with silver hair cut in a perfect bob that didn't move, even as she tilted her head to write something on her clipboard. She wore beige pants and a matching jacket despite the warm weather, with a string of pearls around her neck. Everything about her screamed business, from her sensible low heels to the way she pressed her lips together as she scribbled notes. Tom tried to shuffle past quietly with his groceries, hoping to avoid whatever inspection was happening. But the woman's head snapped up at the sound of his footsteps. "You must be 4C, she said. It wasn't a question. Tom paused, shifting his grocery bags to get a better grip. Yes, I'm Tom. Just moved in a few weeks ago." The woman didn't smile. Instead, she looked him up and down as if he were an item on her checklist. "I'm Beverly Wilson, treasurer of the Oakwood Heights Homeowners Association." She held out her hand, apparently expecting Tom to shake it, despite his arms being full of groceries. After an awkward moment, she withdrew it and returned to her clipboard. "I notice you drive a Tesla," she continued, her voice crisp and formal. Tom glanced at his car. "Yes, I do." Beverly made another note. "You're aware of the community parking bylaws, I assume? Section 7, paragraph 2 specifically addresses assigned parking spaces and vehicle regulations." Tom blinked, feeling a trickle of sweat run down his back that had nothing to do with the heat. "I registered my car with the office when I moved in. They assigned me this spot." Beverly's lips thinned even more. "Yes. Well, there are regulations about vehicle types in standard spaces versus premium spaces. I'll need to review whether your vehicle meets the standard criteria." The way she said vehicle made it sound like Tom was parking a spaceship rather than a car. He nodded uncomfortably, not sure what else to say. "And your patio lights?" Beverly continued, pointing her pen toward Tom's unit. "They're blue." "Yes?" Tom said, confused. Section 12, paragraph 4 states that all exterior lighting must be warm, white, with a color temperature not exceeding 3000 Kelvin. She raised an eyebrow. "Blue is expressly prohibited." Tom's arms were beginning to ache from holding the groceries. "I didn't realize. They came with the place. I haven't changed anything." Ignorance of the bylaws isn't an exception to them, Beverly replied with a small, cold smile. You'll receive an official notice by the end of the week. First-time violations are subject to a verbal warning, but subsequent infractions incur fines starting at $50. With that, she turned sharply and walked away, her heels clicking precisely on the pavement. Tom stood there for a moment, grocery bags growing heavier by the second, wondering what had just happened. Later that evening, as Tom unplugged the offending blue patio lights, his phone rang. It was Mr. Reynolds. I saw you met Beverly today, the older man said without preamble. Yeah, Tom replied, sitting down on his still new couch. Is she always like that? Mr. Reynolds's laugh crackled through the phone. That was her being friendly, son. Beverly runs this place like it's her personal kingdom. Been on the HOA board for over a decade. Used to be president until they voted her out last year. Something about missing funds, but nothing was ever proven. She seemed really concerned about my car, Tom said. Mr. Reynolds's voice dropped. The Tesla. I was afraid of that. Beverly hates anything that stands out. Her husband drove the same beige Buick for 20 years before he passed. She thinks fancy cars bring down the family values of the community. Tom glanced out his window toward his parking spot. Should I be worried? There was a pause on the line. Just keep an eye on that car of yours, Mr. Reynolds finally said. And maybe get yourself a security camera. Beverly likes to make problems disappear when people aren't looking. After they hung up, Tom sat in his living room, the excitement of his new home slightly dimmed. He hadn't expected his first neighborhood drama to arrive so quickly. He made a mental note to order a small security camera online. What he didn't know then, as he ate dinner and watched TV and eventually went to bed, was that Beverly's clipboard notes were just the beginning. The real trouble was still to come, and it would start with those very car keys sitting innocently on his kitchen counter. The morning that would change everything started like any other. Tom woke up at 6:30, hit snooze twice, then finally dragged himself into the shower. His new work project was hitting a critical phase, and he had an important meeting at 9 that he couldn't be late for. The coffee machine gurgled in the kitchen as Tom knotted his tie, glancing at his watch. He still wasn't used to the extra 10 minutes his new commute added. In his old apartment, he could roll out of bed and be at the office in 20 minutes flat. Now he needed to plan better. Tom filled his travel mug with coffee, grabbed his laptop bag and did a quick pat-down for his wallet and phone. The Tesla key fob sat on the little ceramic dish by the door, a housewarming gift from his sister. He dropped the fob into his pocket and headed out. The October morning was crisp, with just enough chill to make his coffee steam when he took a sip. Tom stepped outside and immediately stopped short. There, standing next to his blue Tesla, was Beverly Wilson. Not just standing, she was circling it like a shark, holding her phone up and taking pictures from every angle. She wore the same beige outfit as before, though this time with a matching scarf tied neatly at her neck. Her silver bob caught the morning light as she bent down to photograph Tom's tire. "Excuse me," Tom called out, walking toward her. "What are you doing with my car?" Beverly straightened up, not the least bit embarrassed at being caught. If anything, she seemed pleased to have an audience. "Documentation," she said crisply, holding up her phone. "Your vehicle is improperly parked." Tom looked down at his Tesla. It was sitting exactly where it had been for the past 3 weeks, centered neatly between the white lines that marked his assigned space. "What's wrong with how it's parked?" he asked, trying to keep his voice even. The meeting at 9 flashed through his mind. He really didn't have time for this. Beverly tapped something on her phone screen, then held it up like evidence. "According to my measurements, the rear tire is extending 2.7 inches beyond the parking space boundary. Section 7, paragraph 2, clearly states that all vehicles must be contained entirely within the marked space." Tom took another look at his car. From where he stood, it looked perfectly fine. "I don't see any issue with how it's parked," he said, "but I need to get to work. If there's a real problem, you can email me." He stepped forward, coffee in one hand, lifting the key fob with the other to unlock the car. The familiar beep and flash of light signaled the doors unlocking. Beverly's eyes narrowed at the sound. Before Tom could react, she stepped directly between him and the driver's door. "You can't drive this car until the violation is addressed," she announced, her voice carrying across the quiet morning. A couple heading to their own car paused to watch. "Look," Tom said, his patience wearing thin. "I'm going to be late for work. If you have concerns about my parking, please follow the proper channels and—" "Proper channels? I am the proper channel," Beverly cut in. Her voice rose sharply. "As HOA treasurer, I have the authority to enforce community regulations. This car needs to be moved to a conforming position immediately." Tom took a deep breath. "Okay, fine, I'll move it right now and then I really need to go." He reached for the door handle, but Beverly didn't budge. Instead, her hand shot out with surprising quickness for a woman her age. Before Tom knew what was happening, she had plucked the key fob straight from his fingers. "Hey!" Tom nearly spilled his coffee. "Give that back." Beverly clutched the fob to her chest, backing up a step. "This vehicle is in violation," she repeated louder, glancing around as if hoping for more witnesses. More neighbors were appearing now, curious about the commotion. Luxury vehicles like this aren't permitted in standard spaces without additional fees. "What? That's ridiculous," Tom said, feeling heat rise in his face. "There's nothing in the HOA rules about car types in assigned spaces. Please give me my keys." He held out his hand, trying to stay calm despite the growing audience and the ticking clock. He was definitely going to be late now. Instead of returning the keys, Beverly's face hardened. These kinds of cars lower property values when improperly placed. They should be in the visitor section or the premium spots by the clubhouse. A small crowd had gathered by now. Tom recognized the Patels watching from their front step. Mr. Reynolds had come out too, shaking his head as if he'd seen this movie before. "Beverly," Tom said, forcing his voice to stay steady, "that key fob is my personal property. You need to give it back right now or I'm calling the police." Something changed in Beverly's expression then, a flash of something almost wild in her eyes. "This is an HOA matter, not a police matter," she declared, raising her voice even more. "As a board member, I have the right to impound property used in violations." "Impound my keys, that's not a thing," Tom said, pulling out his phone. "This is theft, plain and simple." Beverly's face flushed red. She backed up another step, still clutching the key fob like it was made of gold. "This isn't even your car, is it?" she suddenly challenged, her voice reaching a pitch that made several onlookers wince. "Someone like you couldn't afford a Tesla. You're probably leasing it to show off." Tom blinked in confusion. "What? Of course it's my car." "No," Beverly said, suddenly jabbing the unlock button on the fob again. The Tesla beeped in response. "This is my Tesla now. You're violating community standards and confiscation is within my rights." Her voice had risen to a near shriek. The small group of neighbors watching the scene unfold exchanged glances of disbelief. Mr. Reynolds muttered something that sounded like, "Not again," to the woman standing next to him. Tom stood frozen, coffee mug in one hand, phone in the other, staring at Beverly in complete shock. He'd dealt with difficult people before, demanding bosses, unreasonable clients, even a particularly stubborn DMV clerk once. But nothing had prepared him for this level of absurdity. "Your Tesla?" he finally managed. "You're claiming my car is yours?" Beverly lifted her chin. "These luxury vehicles aren't permitted in standard spaces," she repeated, her knuckles white around the key fob. "This one clearly doesn't belong to someone following the rules. Therefore, it will be properly relocated to the visitor section." With that, she pressed the fob button again, making the car chirp. The growing crowd of neighbors watched in stunned silence as Beverly Wilson, HOA treasurer and self-appointed parking enforcer, declared ownership of a car everyone knew wasn't hers. And Tom realized that his day was about to get much, much worse. Tom stood there for a moment, his mind racing to catch up with what was happening. The crowd of neighbors had grown to about a dozen people now, some still in their pajamas and robes, others dressed for work but clearly delaying their commutes to watch the drama unfold. "Look," Tom said, trying one more time to be reasonable. "I don't know what's going on here, but that's my car. I bought it. I have the paperwork. I've been driving it for months." "A likely story," Beverly shot back, backing away another step. The key fob still clutched tightly in her hand. Young people like you always think you can just come in and break all the rules. Tom glanced at his watch. His 9-hour meeting was definitely not happening now. With a sigh, he lifted his phone. I'm calling the police, he said firmly. You've taken my property, and you're refusing to return it. That's theft. Something flickered across Beverly's face. Uncertainty, maybe even fear, but it vanished quickly, replaced by the same righteous indignation. Go ahead, she challenged. The police support the HOA. We have an understanding. Tom dialed 911 anyway, turning slightly away from Beverly as the operator answered. Hi, yes, I need to report a theft. I'm at Oakwood Heights townhomes and a woman has stolen my car keys and is refusing to return them. As he spoke to the dispatcher, giving his address and details, Tom noticed Beverly's behavior changing. She began pressing buttons on the key fob frantically. The Tesla responded with beeps and flashing lights, its doors locking and unlocking. Yes, I'll stay on the line, Tom told the dispatcher, watching as Beverly marched over to a white sedan, parked 2 spaces down. This is my car, she announced to the growing crowd, pressing the Tesla fob toward the sedan. Predictably, nothing happened. She tried again, jabbing the button harder as if that would make a difference. It's not working because the battery must be low, she explained loudly to no one in particular. Mrs. Patel, who had been watching silently until now, stepped forward. Beverly. That's Larry's Toyota. Everyone knows he's lived here for years. Beverly ignored her, continuing to aim the fob at various cars in the lot, growing more frustrated when none responded. She seems confused, Tom said quietly to the dispatcher. I'm not sure if she's having some kind of episode, but she's still got my keys. Just then, Beverly's head whipped around toward Tom's Tesla. Her eyes narrowed, as if she just remembered something important. With surprising speed for a woman in her late 50s, she darted back to the blue electric car and pressed the unlock button one more time. The vehicle chirped obediently. Before anyone could react, Beverly yanked open the driver's door and climbed inside. Oh no, Tom said, both to the dispatcher and to the stunned crowd. She's getting in my car now. Please send someone quickly. Mr. Reynolds shuffled over to stand beside Tom. Told you to watch out for her, he muttered. Last summer she tried to have the Garcia kid's bike impounded because the color wasn't on the approved list. Inside the Tesla, Beverly was clearly struggling to figure out how to start it. Unlike traditional cars, Teslas don't have an ignition slot for keys. Just put the fob in your pocket, press the brake, and push a button. From the way she was fumbling around the steering column, it was clear Beverly had never driven one before. What's she doing? Asked a man Tom didn't recognize, wearing a bathrobe and slippers. Trying to steal my car, I think, Tom replied, still holding the phone to his ear. Police should be here in about 5 minutes, the dispatcher's voice informed him. Those 5 minutes felt like an eternity. The crowd of neighbors continued to grow, everyone maintaining a safe distance from the Tesla while Beverly jabbed at buttons and screens inside. Tom could see her getting increasingly frustrated, her face flushing red as she pounded on the steering wheel. One of the neighbors, a tall woman with curly hair, sidled up to Tom. She once tried to fine me for having the wrong kind of mailbox. Flag, she whispered. When I pointed out it was the standard one that came with the unit, she said I should have applied for a variance before moving in. Last year she tried to ban children under 10 from using the pool on weekends, added another neighbor. Said they lowered property values by splashing too much. Tom was beginning to understand that Beverly's behavior, while extreme today, wasn't entirely out of character. The other residents had simply learned to avoid her or give in to her demands. No one had ever pushed back hard enough to trigger this level of meltdown. Inside the car, Beverly had apparently found the center touchscreen and was jabbing at it randomly. Tom winced as he watched her stab at the controls for his carefully customized settings. Should we try to get her out? Asked the man in the bathrobe. Better wait for the police, Mr. Reynolds cautioned. That woman would sue you for breathing in her direction. Tom nodded in agreement, though it pained him to watch Beverly pawing through his glove compartment now, tossing papers and the car manual onto the passenger seat. The police are on their way, he called out loudly enough for Beverly to hear. This would be a good time to return my keys and avoid more trouble. Beverly's head popped up from where she'd been searching under the seat. Through the window, Tom could see her mouth moving rapidly, though he couldn't make out the words. She was gesturing wildly with one hand while still trying different buttons with the other. "I think she's looking for the ignition," whispered Mrs. Patel with a hint of amusement in her voice. Just then, Beverly hit something that made the car's horn blare loudly. Everyone jumped, including Beverly, who somehow managed to activate the windshield wipers in her surprise. They squeaked across the dry glass as the horn continued to sound. The noise seemed to agitate Beverly further. She began rolling down the bar window manually, another sign she wasn't familiar with the car's electronic controls. "This vehicle is malfunctioning," she shouted over the horn. "Further proof it's not being properly maintained according to HOA standards." "It's working exactly as designed," Tom called back. "You just don't know how to operate it." Beverly's face contorted with rage. "I do know how to operate my Tesla. I've owned it for years." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter passed through the crowd. Even those who didn't know Tom personally had seen him driving the blue car for weeks. Just as Beverly seemed ready to launch into another tirade, the distinctive sound of sirens cut through the morning air. The Tesla's horn was still blaring, the wipers still squeaking as two police cars pulled into the community entrance. Tom had never been so relieved to see flashing lights in his life. The police cars pulled into the community parking lot, tires crunching over the perfectly maintained pavement. Two officers stepped out, a tall man with a stern expression and a shorter woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. They surveyed the scene. A crowd of neighbors in a semicircle, a blue Tesla with its horn still blaring and wipers moving, and inside, a well-dressed older woman frantically pushing buttons. "That's Officer Liu and Officer Ramirez," Mr. Reynolds whispered to Tom. "They've been out here before, not for something this crazy, though." Tom stepped forward as the officers approached, phone still in one hand, cold coffee in the other. "Hi, I'm Tom Chen. I called about my stolen keys." Officer Liu, the taller one, nodded. "Can you tell us what happened here?" Tom explained the situation, as clearly as he could, how Beverly had confronted him about his parking, snatched his key fob, and was now inside his Tesla, claiming it belonged to her. Officer Ramirez glanced toward the car. "And that's her in there now?" "Yes," Tom confirmed. "Her name is Beverly Wilson. She's on the HOA board. She took my keys about 15 minutes ago and has been trying to start my car." The officers exchanged a look that suggested they were familiar with HOA disputes, though perhaps not quite at this level. Officer Liu pulled out a small notebook. "Do you have proof of ownership for the vehicle?" he asked. Tom pulled up his insurance app on his phone and showed it to the officer. "Here's my insurance card. The registration is in the glove compartment, but—" He gestured toward Beverly, who was still in the driver's seat. Officer Ramirez nodded. "We'll handle it from here." The two officers approached the Tesla cautiously. By now, Beverly had managed to turn off the horn but was still struggling with the wipers, which continued to squeak across the dry windshield. "Ma'am," Officer Liu called, tapping on the driver's window. "Could you step out of the vehicle, please?" Beverly rolled down the window, her face flushed with exertion, but her expression immediately switching to one of relief. "Oh, thank goodness you're here, officers," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "This young man is trying to steal my parking spot with his illegally parked vehicle." Officer Ramirez's face remained neutral. "Ma'am, we understand there's a dispute, but right now we need you to step out of the vehicle so we can sort this out." Beverly's smile tightened. "This is an HOA matter, officers. We have rules about where certain types of vehicles can park. Be that as it may," Officer Liu said firmly. "You're currently in possession of property that, according to our information, belongs to Mr. Chen. Please step out of the vehicle." Beverly's demeanor changed instantly. The sweet smile vanished, replaced by indignation. "This Tesla belongs in the premium parking section. He's violating Code 7.2. The officers remained calm. "Ma'am, please exit the vehicle now. We can discuss." The HOA regulations after you've stepped out. Instead of complying, Beverly rolled up the window and locked the doors. A collective murmur went through the crowd of neighbors. Tom stared in disbelief. Was she really refusing to obey police officers? Is she allowed to do that? He asked Mr. Reynolds quietly. The older man shook his head. She thinks she's above everyone, even the law. Been that way ever since her husband died and left her that trust fund. Officer Liu knocked on the window again, harder this time. Ma'am? Refusing to comply with a police request is only going to make the situation worse. Please exit the vehicle immediately. Inside the car, Beverly was fumbling with her phone now, apparently trying to make a call. Her lips were moving rapidly, though no one outside could hear what she was saying. Who's she calling? Tom wondered aloud. Probably her nephew, offered a woman standing nearby. He's a lawyer in the city. She threatens to call him anytime someone challenges her about anything. Officer Ramirez stepped away from the Tesla and walked over to her patrol car. She returned a moment later with what looked like a small toolkit. Last chance, ma'am. Officer, Lou called through the glass. Please exit the vehicle voluntarily or we will have to take measures to remove you. Beverly responded by waving her phone at him and mouthing what appeared to be, "My lawyer will hear about this." Officer Ramirez sighed and pulled something that looked like a thin metal strip from her toolkit. "We're authorized to open the vehicle if there's a refusal to comply," she explained to Tom. "Though usually we're doing this to rescue pets or children, not remove HOA board members." Just as she was about to slide the tool between the window and the door frame, Beverly's phone apparently connected to someone. The officers and neighbors watched as she spoke animatedly, gesturing toward them through the windshield. After about 30 seconds, her expression changed. She looked down at her phone in disbelief, then back up at the officers waiting patiently outside. Whatever the person on the other end had told her, it clearly wasn't what she wanted to hear. With obvious reluctance, Beverly pressed the unlock button. The Tesla chirped, and Officer Liu promptly opened the door. "Ma'am, please step out of the vehicle," he repeated. Beverly gathered herself up with as much dignity as she could muster. "My nephew says there's been a misunderstanding," she announced, to everyone within earshot. "He advises me to cooperate while we sort this out." She emerged from the Tesla, still clutching Tom's key fob in one hand and her phone in the other. "Now," Officer Ramirez said calmly, "let's start by returning Mr. Chen's property." Beverly looked down at the key fob as if noticing it for the first time. This isn't his. This is mine." Officer Liu's expression didn't change, but his voice took on an edge of impatience. "Ma'am, we've verified that the vehicle belongs to Mr. Chen. That means the key fob is also his property. Please hand it over." "But the parking violation," Beverly began, "is not relevant to the fact that you've taken someone else's property," Officer Ramirez finished for her. "If there are legitimate HOA concerns, they need to be addressed through proper channels, not by taking matters into your own hands." Beverly's face flushed deeper. She looked around at the gathered neighbors, perhaps expecting someone to come to her defense. No one did. Even those who usually avoided crossing her were watching with barely concealed satisfaction. "This is ridiculous," she huffed. "I've been on the board for 12 years. I know the rules better than anyone." "Ma'am," Officer Liu said with strained patience, "the key fob, please." With a dramatic sigh that seemed to suggest she was the reasonable one making a concession, Beverly finally extended her hand with the key fob. Officer Liu took it and walked it back to Tom. "Thank you," Tom said, relief washing over him as he pocketed his keys. But the drama wasn't over. As Officer Ramirez began explaining to Beverly why taking someone's property was illegal regardless of any HOA regulations, Beverly's indignation only seemed to grow. "You don't understand," she interrupted, her voice rising again. "These young people move in here with their fancy cars and no respect for our community values. I was protecting our property values." The officers exchanged glances. What had started as a simple return of stolen property was clearly escalating again. "Ma'am," Officer Liu said, his tone now leaving no room for argument, "we need to see some identification, please." This request seemed to snap Beverly back to reality. For the first time, a flicker of genuine concern crossed her face. Identification? Why would you need that? This is just a civil matter between neighbors. Taking someone's property without permission is theft, Officer Ramirez explained patiently. Currently, we're investigating a potential crime. Your ID, please. Beverly clutched her designer handbag closer to her chest. I don't think that's necessary. I'm sure we can resolve this without your ID, ma'am, Officer Liu repeated firmly. The crowd of neighbors watched in tense silence as Beverly Wilson, self-appointed enforcer of rules and regulations, found herself on the receiving end of authority she couldn't override. The standoff in the parking lot of Oakwood Heights lasted another 15 tense minutes. Beverly reluctantly handed over her driver's license after several more warnings from the officers. As Officer Ramirez ran the ID through their system, Officer Liu continued questioning Beverly about the morning's events. So you're saying you took Mr. Chen's keys because his car was improperly parked? The officer asked, for what seemed like the third time, his pen poised over his notebook. It wasn't just improperly parked, Beverly insisted, her voice still carrying that note of righteous indignation. It was in violation of community standards. Luxury vehicles are required to use the premium parking section. Officer Liu looked up from his notepad. Could you show me where that's written in your HOA regulations? Beverly blinked rapidly. Well, I don't have a copy with me right now, but it's in Section 7, Paragraph 2. From the edge of the crowd, Mrs. Patel stepped forward. Actually, I have a digital copy right here, she said, holding up her tablet. I downloaded it when we moved in last year. There's nothing in Section 7 about different parking for different types of cars. Beverly's face flushed deeper. It's an unwritten rule, a community standard. An unwritten rule. Officer Liu's voice was flat. So you took someone's car keys to enforce a rule that isn't actually in your regulations. Before Beverly could respond, Officer Ramirez returned from the patrol car. She gave a small nod to her partner, then turned to Beverly. Mrs. Wilson, based on the statements from witnesses and the evidence we've gathered, I'm placing you under arrest for theft of personal property. A shocked murmur ran through the crowd. Beverly's eyes widened in disbelief. Arrest? That's absurd. I was enforcing community standards. I'm on the HOA board. Being on an HOA board doesn't give you the right to take other people's property, Officer Ramirez explained calmly as she removed a pair of handcuffs from her belt. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back. For a moment it seemed Beverly might refuse this command too. She looked wildly around at the gathered neighbors, her expression a mix of shock and betrayal. No one stepped forward to defend her. This is outrageous, she sputtered. Do you know who I am? I've lived here for 15 years. I was HOA president for 6 of them. Ma'am, please turn around, Officer Liu repeated firmly. With visible reluctance, Beverly finally complied. There was something surreal about watching the self-appointed enforcer of rules being handcuffed in the middle of the community she'd terrorized for years. Several neighbors exchanged glances, as if unable to believe what they were seeing. This is all a misunderstanding, Beverly continued as Officer Ramirez secured the cuffs. My nephew is a lawyer. He'll have this sorted out before lunch. You have the right to remain silent, Officer Ramirez began, reciting the Miranda rights as Beverly stood stiffly in the handcuffs. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As the officer continued, Tom finally allowed himself to relax slightly. The key fob was back in his pocket, his car was safe, and the woman who had caused all this chaos was facing consequences. Still, he felt a twinge of something almost like pity watching Beverly, who despite her awfulness was old enough to be his mother, being led toward the patrol car in handcuffs. Is this really necessary? He asked Officer Liu quietly. I got my keys back. I don't want to press charges if... Mr. Chen, the officer interrupted gently. I understand your concern, but this isn't just about the keys anymore. Mrs. Wilson refused lawful commands from police officers, attempted to operate a vehicle that wasn't hers, and has been exhibiting concerning behavior. For her safety and others, we need to take her in. Tom nodded slowly. I understand. As Officer Ramirez guided Beverly toward the patrol car, the older woman turned her head to address the crowd one last time. You're all witnesses. This is harassment. I was protecting our community values. You'll all be sorry when property values drop because of unregulated parking patterns. Her voice carried across the lot until she was finally seated in the back of the patrol car, the door firmly closed. Even then, they could see her mouth still moving, apparently continuing her rant to no one. The crowd began to disperse slowly as the police car pulled away. Tom was left standing by his Tesla, key fob in hand, unsure exactly how to process everything that had just happened. Mr. Reynolds shuffled over to him. Quite a way to start your morning, eh? Tom laughed despite himself. Not exactly how I planned to spend it. Been a long time coming, said a woman Tom hadn't met before. Beverly's been getting worse ever since they voted her out as president last year. Last month she measured my grass with a ruler and tried to fine me because it was a quarter-inch too long. She once followed my daughter around the pool counting how many times she splashed, added another neighbor. Said there was a 3-splash maximum per hour. As more residents shared their Beverly horror stories, Tom realized something was happening. People who normally just nodded to each other in passing were laughing together, introducing themselves, exchanging phone numbers. In her attempt to enforce community standards, Beverly had inadvertently created a genuine sense of community, united against her. You should come to the next HOA meeting, Mrs. Patel suggested to Tom. We need some new blood on the board. Someone who won't go power mad with a clipboard. Oh, I don't know about that, Tom said, thinking about his already busy work schedule. Just think about it, Mr. Reynolds urged. Could use someone with common sense for a change. Before Tom could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from his boss. Everything okay? Missed you at the meeting. Shoot, Tom muttered. I completely forgot about work. Tell them you were busy getting carjacked by the HOA police, suggested a neighbor, triggering another round of laughter. Tom grinned as he typed a quick response explaining that he'd had an unexpected situation with a neighbor and would be there soon. He looked up at the small group that had remained chatting in the parking lot. I should probably get going, he said, gesturing to his car. But thanks, everyone. I appreciate the support. That's what neighbors are for, said Mrs. Patel warmly. Real neighbors, not self-appointed dictators. As Tom finally got into his Tesla, a full hour later than he'd planned, he found himself smiling despite the bizarre morning. He'd only lived in Oakwood Heights for 3 weeks, but somehow, after this strange shared experience, it was starting to feel like home. 6 weeks later, Tom sat in the community clubhouse alongside Mr. Reynolds, Mrs. Patel, and a dozen other residents. Beverly was notably absent, still dealing with her court-mandated community service and the restraining order that prevented her from approaching Tom or his property. All in favor of installing security cameras in the parking areas? Raise your hands, said the new HOA president, a friendly retired teacher named Mrs. Williams. Every hand went up. Motion passes unanimously, Mrs. Williams announced. And now for our final item of business. The proposal to revise HOA bylaws to prevent board members from personally enforcing rules through confrontation or property seizure. Tom raised his hand. As the newest member of the board, he'd helped draft this amendment after hearing too many stories about Beverly's reign of terror. The proposed amendment requires all enforcement actions to be conducted through written notice with proper documentation, he explained. No more clipboard ambushes or key confiscations. The vote for this measure passed unanimously, too. As the meeting wrapped up, Tom chatted with his neighbors, people who were now friends rather than strangers. The Tesla sat safely in his parking spot, exactly where it belonged, and Oakwood Heights had become not just a place to live but a true community. Sometimes, he reflected as he walked back to his townhouse that evening, the most unexpected problems lead to the best solutions. And sometimes it takes an HOA Karen getting dragged off in handcuffs for people to remember what being neighbors is really about. The end.